My name's Tyler Lyne, and we have started a supper club called Tasting TBL. I am the engineer. That's what I am. That's what I do. And a lifetime of effort has gone in to be able to even have the capacity to give someone that experience and that memory. And that's the business we're in, is memories. I've had a lot of great meals. I couldn't tell you one thing that I ate. All I can tell you is that it was awesome.
Yeah.
Because, people will always forget what you do or say, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
That's right.
And, it's one of those things where it's like, that's the magic we're trying to capture.
Ready? Ready to rock and roll? Is that action? All right.
Okay. That's right.
All right.
Absolutely. Go. Go.
Hello, everybody. It's Jason Will with
Go.
So this is a real estate podcast, but we talk about leadership, personal growth, and becoming the best version of yourself. Leadership, check 1, 2, check 1, 2. Growth, best version of yourself.
Go.
So this is a real estate podcast. Welcome, everybody, to the Impact Agent Podcast. I've got some special guests with us today. My beautiful wife is joining us as a guest host. Welcome, Diana Will.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And we've got Tyler. Tyler, tell us a little bit about yourself and your business.
Thanks for having me. My name's Tyler Lyne. We have moved to Birmingham very recently, and we have started a supper club called Tasting TBL. And we are just cooking once a week for people who want to come and check it out. And, in the meantime, while this COVID thing's going. So that's about what we're doing.
Diane and I were lucky enough to get an invite to a birthday party that was hosted at the Tasting TBL, which is at your house. That's what makes it special, right? It's in your kitchen, in your living room, at your table. And it's really, really, it's an intimate setting, but it's very interactive. Like, you let us be a part of the process and the part of just observe how everything kind of comes together. So we talked after we left. Diane and I both said, that was the most memorable dining experience we've ever had.
Ever. Yeah, ever.
It was just so unique. So I want to dive into that as part of your story, but you've got this massive story, right? So the Tasting TBL is part of your COVID pivot. Things really hit the fan, and so you had to figure out how to survive. And so I couldn't think of a more creative way to do that. So tell us a little bit about your history with food. How did that passion evolve?
Something like this just isn't, you don't decide to do this, one day. It's a slow build and sort of passive. Looking back, it's extremely funny how it all does sort of come together or come full circle. So for me, it started, and I speak in general terms because it's, I think there's a lot of parallels between Alabama and Texas. They seem to be a very similar place with similar style of people. I grew up in Texas, born and raised, and everything you do culturally pretty much revolves around food. So if you're going to a lunch after church, it's food. If you go to a birthday party, if you go to a party, if you go to a family function, it's just food always seems to be something that's there. And so, my mom did a great job by sort of raising us up on how to appreciate good food. She was a hell of a cook. And my friends growing up in middle school, high school, would always come over to my house because they knew, we were going to have a pretty awesome meal. And, while, they're eating, steak and potatoes and green beans every night, we had, my mom would do things like artichokes and hollandaise. Now it seems nothing special, but at the time, my friends would look at it and be like, what's that? It looks like an alien plant. I'm like, oh man, this is a artichoke. You never had artichoke? Pull the leaf, dip in that hollandaise. They're like, oh my God, this is so good. And, they would literally ask, hey, can we come have dinner at your house tonight? And, because mom always put some effort into it. And, God bless her. We've all got our faults, but that was a big skill of hers. And we grew up loving to eat. From there, it just evolved as I got older to, in high school, all I wanted to do was party. And, I quickly learned that the guy that knew how to cook would always be invited to all the parties. And so I sharpened my skills, and, this is just stuff in a field, on a ranch, with a pit or a barbecue or a fire or a, propane grill, whatever we had, that's what we had to cook with. So, just simple stuff, but it took great pride in, feeding people, my friends well. And, it seemed to be 80% of the time was just focused on acquiring groceries for cooking, and 20% of the time was actually used to acquire beer and, the bad stuff, so. And eventually I came to a point where, I looked at my parents, I was like, I think I'm going to go do culinary school. And I'm not proud of it or it's a thing that really guides my life now, because I didn't really have any options, when I got done with school. And it's not that I made bad grades. I mean, I made great grades, all A's and a B. What happened with little effort, making all A's, became a B started trickling in here and there. And so, I didn't ever apply myself at all and remotely. I would go into a classroom and say to the teacher on day one, I only had one question and I was only interested in one answer. What is the breakdown between tests and daily work? So they'd be like, oh, it's a 80-20 split. So I'm like, cool. I'm not going to do one homework assignment. It's like every day I cracked in, like, hey, you got your homework. So zero, and then I'd go in there and I'd ace a test and I'd make a B in the class. You know what I mean? And it's a horrible frame of mind. And it really just sort of stems from fear. I was a scared kid. My greatest fear was the fear of failure. And I never wanted to truly apply myself because I'd always had that thing to rest on and be like, if I really applied myself, I could do straight A's, or, it's like, but I choose to do this and suffer the consequences of that sort of at the end of my, high school career. And I went to culinary school. I'm just trying to paint a picture for, that I'm sure a lot of us can relate to in some way, shape, or form. However, even a little percentage of truth to everyone's story, because we all suffer from the same disease, which is, all the things I sort of brought up, fear, confidence, your place, your popularity. I mean, these are all things that everyone struggles with for their whole lives. I don't care who you are. Right. And you sort of have to go, through the gambit, on all highs and lows to sort of come back full circle and appreciate, where you made mistakes and correct those. So, and I was in a class and this teacher was like, you should always write these quotes on the board. And I always thought they were stupid. And we'd walk in there and roll your eyes at it, but you'd still read it. And one day I was there and I was just in a weird place. I think I had 2 weeks left of school. And the quote on the board, I'll never forget it. It said, you can't discover new oceans if you're afraid to lose sight of the shore. And it really summed up, where my headspace was, is that, I never applied myself because I was afraid of, leaving my town of familiar, my place of friends. And, I had my place, I was a, pretty locally famous kid in school, that had all the parties. And, it was like, I was the guy to know. We had a ranch, so I had a place to, I had connections to get the alcohol. And it was like, that was my spot. And I enjoyed it and had a lot of fun. But, at the end of the day, I stopped having those parties because those parties just kept increasing in scale and, risk. And so finally I was like, I'm kind of done having these parties. And when I was a senior year and I saw that quote and then, I made a decision, I was like, cool, like I am done screwing around. Like, I'm going to go do this thing, this chef thing. I don't know where it's going to take me, but I'm not going to make the same mistakes, and I'm going to apply myself this time. I'm like, I'm listening to the class, I'm just having this conversation in my head. It just made a quick decision, and I was very good with the decision. I was at peace, and told my parents. They were freaking out. Like, I thought you're going to go to Texas A&M and be an architect or an engineer, and I'm like, I want to be a chef. So we went to Culinary Institute of America, and I'd never been there before. We literally just showed up one day and started, and it's like walking up to Hogwarts. I mean, it's Harry Potter level stuff. It's bizarre and beautiful and amazing, and it's just, my parents were blown away. Like, when they saw it, they were like, okay, this is going to be something. This is real. This is cool. They're big fans now, very supportive in what I do. Where my headspace is with Culinary Institute of America is that, a lot of these kids are coming to college for the first time, just beginning to let loose, and I'd been doing it at a pretty hardcore, high level. So you can imagine me going to college, and I've already gone through this whole journey. The whole concept of going out and drinking and doing it was pretty boring to me at this point in time because I've been doing it before I was 16 years old, So going to culinary school, I was really focused. I wasn't going to repeat the errors of my past, and, I really applied myself. And that's all I did was eat, sleep, and drink it. And, I quickly progressed to be extremely knowledgeable. I read everything I could. I really put my effort because I wanted to know. Like, I really wanted to know, from my heart of hearts, what it was that I was truly capable of. Like, I wanted to know my limits. So I really pushed to try to discover what those were. You sort of that saying where it's like you get out of something what you put into it. And, I put everything into it. So I got a lot out of it. And, once I finished school, I stayed on and worked at the CIA for, a lot of places call it a lot of names. If you're at like a normal university, it might be called a teaching assistant or a fellow, a manager in training type things, So I did that for one of the restaurants. It's called Catering de Medici. It's their, the Culinary Institute of America's premier restaurant. It's gorgeous, and it's where you want to be. And so I was the guy there, and I started with a guy named Ken Arnone. He was a certified master chef, and it's something, if nobody knows about it, there's probably 50 certified master chefs in the world. I mean, it's very difficult to do. It's almost impossible, and it has like a 5% pass rate. It's very grueling. You can only do it maybe once or twice in your life because it's 10 days and it's 24 hours a day. It's brutal. And the Culinary Institute of America is a great place, and there's some talented people, but that experience put me 10 years ahead of the curve, and just experience-wise, because every 2 weeks that class rotated and became a new class. So it's like you're opening a restaurant every 2 weeks.
That's so cool.
And so you get a lot of practice sort of like communicating, setting the stations up, figuring out these kids are coming in at a certain time. You needed them to produce the same level of food the day before from kids that already figured it out for 2 weeks. The restaurant couldn't feel that inexperience, so it had to operate at the same level. And that experience puts you a very good deal ahead when you get out into the real world. From there, I did my certifications. Culinary Institute of America sent me to Japan, so I was there for a while, and then I then also did my certifications that are online with the Certified Master Chef exam. So every trade has a governing body. So if I'm a plumber, there is a thing that I would subscribe to in order to get my license to be able to operate, master license. My journeyman, they all work the same way. You sort of record your hours, you become an apprentice, and then you work your way up to journeyman. You submit 6,000 hours of doing something with people under you, and then you go and take a little test, or they test your skills so you know this, and they give you a certification. So finally, the only difference is that you have to have a master level license to be able to do the trade. So if you're an electrician, probably the owner of that company has a master electrician license. If you're at a plumbing company, the owner of that company probably has a master plumber's license, and that's what they're registered under, and that's how they can operate and do business in that state. Cooking's not like that. You don't have to be a master chef to have a license where you can operate. So you can just be anybody. And so it's a little different in that sense, but they still keep the same, spirit of the thing. So when you start out with like certified culinarian, goes to certified sous chef, goes to certified chef de cuisine, certified executive chef, and then certified master chef. So I did my certifications. The CIA was promoting this thing called Pro Chef. Pro Chef is the CIA versions of their certifications, 1, 2, and 3. And you get a dual certification through the ACF, which is the American Culinary Federation. None of this means anything because, I did all these things. And as soon as I went to New York and, they looked at my resume and I had these things on there, they were like laughing at me. So, the chef, his name's James Kent, very famous. He's Lev Madison Park is one of the number one restaurants in the world. And he looked at me and he's like, so, all right, dude, I'm going to give you advice. You need to take this shit off this resume because you're famous. We get it. I'm like, no, that's not what I mean. I'm just trying to let you know that I'm ambitious and I commit myself and it's like I'm going to be the same for this that I am or here, but they don't get it. It's a different world. It's two divergence of like, if you're usually like an ACF guy, you usually work in hotels. Hotels really like that stuff, and they're usually not real. Like an ACF certified guy is not. They're for the most part are kind of like fakes. They're not like in the industry and slugging it out at a super high level like in New York City. So I just took it off my resume and buried it and never talked about it again. Like no one knows about this about me because, it's just something that they don't respect. If I was going to have this ACF side of things and certified and all this stuff, like I wanted to have the credentials too, of like being legit in the trenches, taking grenades, having men follow me to battle, and we're going to crush, And so, the main majority of the guys like this, they really can't do that. They're not really good cooks. In a calm environment, they can do some techniques, but they're not like slugging it out.
They have the knowledge.
Yeah. But I did that, and I was the, youngest guy to do those certifications, to this day. So I was like 20 years old, and I was a certified executive chef.
So cool.
Right.
But didn't give you any street cred.
In that world, it did.
Yeah.
In that world, I was highly respected because I thought being a teaching assistant and like knowing these guys that were like grading this thing, I'd be like, I got this. Like these guys are going to totally, slide me through just because they like me. I'm like, no, I feel like they were harder on me. And it's not like I passed with flying colors. I mean, I literally came under the skin of my teeth. Like at 67, it's like, okay, that's like,
A D plus.
Yeah, it's but yeah, I mean, but once you get it, it doesn't matter what you make because as long as you pass, you pass. So, always something I'm very proud of. There's not a lot of people that would even have the courage to do it. And looking back on it, I was very foolish to think I was able to do it. And it took a lot of time. It took a lot of effort. I studied a lot, really hard for it. And it's just like it's not that it's hard. It's just you have to have a lot of knowledge. A funny story is that I've been in New York for a few years now, and I like to go and trail. I like to go and stage, not for like jobs or anything. Just like I want to get in that kitchen. I want to work a day and just see what they're doing. It kind of keeps you can see things that are done. Maybe they do it like you, maybe they do it differently than you. But I remember I walked in and I'm like working at this. I did a trail at Cafe Baloo. It's one of Danielle Baloo's restaurants. Michelin star. 3-star New York Times. I mean, it's a really good restaurant. And I'm there, and like, I'm just not even thinking. I'm just kind of prepping, and you're there. You're talking. It's like, so who are you? Where are you from? What are you doing here? You looking for a job? Like what? And this girl kind of working next to her, and we're just talking, and she's like, what's your name? I'm like, oh, Tyler. And she's like, oh, okay, cool. And then like, it's just like, where'd you go to culinary school? Yeah, I went to CIA, and yeah, she's sort of depicting these things. She's like, finally, she just like puts her knife down, and she's like, wait, are you Tyler Lyne? I'm like, yeah, that's my name. She's like, oh my God, I gotta tell my boyfriend. This is Tyler Lyne. Like, oh my God, like we went to CIA too, and we did we tried to do the pro chef certifications. You're just, this is 5 years out of school, and they're like, oh man, they still talk about you. I'm like, oh, cool, because you just leave and you never look back. So, it was cool to like see that people who were interested, it's like still, well, Tyler's a good example that it can be done, and he's done it and stuff like that, which is sort of a strange experience to sort of sit through because you just don't even think about it or yourself like that, and you're just trying to survive and do the best you can. And well, actually, after CIA, I actually moved to Ithaca, New York, which is where Cornell is, and I wanted to go do my bachelor's at their hotel school for the same reason I went to CIA. It's like they're the best at what they do, and Cornell's the best at what they do, and I wanted to be the best, so I wanted to go to the best, right? Trying to check off the boxes, and so I started going there, and it was a very different experience than the CIA because I wasn't very impressed. It's like you go to these places and you're like blown away, you're super impressed, and you go to there, you're just like, this is it, like this is what it is, this is what all the hype's about. And, they thought their food was great in that town. I mean, it's just not great. And, it's like, I ask around what the best restaurant in town was. Like, oh, got to go to Heights Cafe. I'm like, cool, I'm going to go get a job there. So I get a job there just to kind of cook and stay sharp. I don't want to lose my skills. And, it's just super unhappy. Just garbage food, garbage place. You're around 18-year-old kids that are insanely wealthy, going to this school. It's just imagine, from now the story before to now, you can sort of imagine in your minds that, okay, like I can see where this guy's coming from. I think so little of myself in terms of I just always think that I suck, right? And so I know I don't suck, but in my heart of hearts, it's like, man, I'm not good enough. So I'm gonna have to keep working hard to like, get my full potential out, right?
That's Tom Brady, right? I mean, that's his whole story.
Really? Yeah.
I mean, if you
Chip
got,
on your shoulder.
yeah, it's an incredible motivator.
It is.
it's like, and I get a real problem when people walk around me and just think they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. I mean, there's times I'll say it to them, but for the most part, I don't say it to them. It's just kind of like nails on a chalkboard. It's just very annoying to me. And, because I'm there giving my full effort and, trying to stay as humble as I possibly can. When, being a chef is, it's almost contradictory to that statement because, chefs are not humble people, very prideful, very ego-driven. You know the horror stories of yelling and screaming and throwing stuff. I mean, that comes from ego, And so, having, one of my diseases that I have to fight all the time is my ego, trying to keep it in check and stay humble and, keep everything in perspective, for self-reflection purposes and trying to keep my reality as sane as everyone else, right? Because, it's one of the problems. It's like, we don't have the ability to look from the outside in. We're always stuck looking from the inside out. So it's very hard not to perceive reality as it revolves around you. And so, the mind is a great tool and it's one of your greatest assets, but it's also one of your greatest enemies because you're just stuck with it all the time, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You're having to listen to that. And, it can convince you of anything because it has time on its side and you can't turn it off. And so it's very hard, like a game of golf. You're never going to master golf, but there's just times that you can sort of tame it, and look at Tiger Woods. I mean, he tamed that game for quite a while, but he lost it somewhere. He's never been able to tame it back in again. And and chefing is a very lonely thing. It's like it's sort of like you're by yourself. It's not a very social thing, and just the mental fortitude that it takes to do it is huge because you have to keep those standards and you can't waver from those standards, and it becomes like mowing a lawn. How often do you have to mow the lawn before you're just like, oh, I got to mow it again next week. Oh my God. You know what I mean? It just because it's going to grow back. And so, every day it's like you have no sense of gratification in a long-term sense because you're just like, oh God, I'm exhausted. I got to do it again tomorrow. It's just keep walking in there enthusiastically and like, hey, what are you doing? We're going to crush. This is what we do. This is our DNA here. It's like we don't cut those corners. It's very hard mental fortitude to have all the time. And you can't ever waver from it. And we're only human, so we're flawed and weak in that sense, and it takes a lot of effort to sort of maintain that level of craftsmanship. Finally, I quit that restaurant, and it was a pretty awesome quit too because garbage restaurant. And by that point, I started just eating all the restaurants, and like I found a place. It was a little French bistro, fairly new, in a crappy strip mall. But you walked in, I mean, beautiful food, delicious, well made. And I was like, holy crap. I literally put my fork down. I was like, this is amazing. And I got it from the table and I went back in the kitchen. I was like, hey, man. And it was about the size of this room. It was tiny. It could fit 2 people, And I was like, hey, was the chef here? He's like, yeah, I'm the chef and owner. And I was like, cool. Like, I'm looking for a job and I want to work here. And he's like, well, I mean, we don't need anybody. It's me and one other person. And I was like, cool. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm going to come work here for free. And he's like, cool, you start tomorrow. And so, I did like one service, and then after that service, he's like, all right, you're hired. Once he saw what I could do, he's like, yeah, well, this is what I can pay you. I'm like, cool, doesn't matter. Oh, great, thank you. Started working there, and like, it was awesome. Had a great time, made great food. It was just fun. And he was cool. He's from New York. He went to Cornell. His wife went to Cornell. And then, as we're going, though, he's just like, dude, what are you doing here, man? I'm like, what do you think I'm doing? I'm going to Cornell. I'm checking the boxes off. I'm doing all the right things, right? And he's like, oh, dude. He's like, he pointed to his degree on the wall. He's like, I got a degree. He's like, look at the one that's my wife's degree. He's like, we can pat ourselves on the back, because we have our own business. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good point. He's like, listen, my buddy's opening a restaurant in New York. I want you to go work for him. I'm like, okay, maybe this is interesting. Maybe I'll do it. And, I was desperate to get out. So I took the opportunity and moved to New York, took that job. It was sort of my time in New York. That was 2006, and then I was there ever since.
And then COVID hits, and it just decimates the hospitality industry.
New York is absolutely destroyed. Yeah. It's a wasteland. It's a wasteland, for sure.
So that becomes the reality, and you gotta figure it out. You gotta pivot. What do you do?
It sort of happened in stages, and we didn't have a plan after just getting one thing executed. So we knew we had to get out of New York. We were just like, we were dying on the vine. Our apartment at the time was costing us $9,000 a month. And
wow.
Yeah. And so how long can you sustain that, with no revenue or income? So it was like we didn't have the luxury of sort of like waiting it out. So it was like, yeah, we're done. We're moving out. I tried to follow the universe, right? I like to imagine that I'm enlightened enough to sort of see signs as they come, right? To my own selfish perspective. And when the whole Birmingham thing came up, I was talking to my sister, and she was like, hey, you should, this house is coming up these people are moving out of this home, and they're going to put it up for sale right next door. So she went over there, and long story short is that we sort of struck a deal. I mean, the house was never put up on the market. This was like between just owner and, there's no realtor involved. It was just, I don't even know what that's called. It's just, we just bought the house. My sister hooked me up with, the mortgage company that she used, and he was an awesome guy that, just really bent over backwards to make it happen. And, knowing my predicament, that was a blessing. And then, we made the decision. We'd never seen the house. Like, we bought it sight unseen. We're like, yeah, all we knew is that it would be next door to my sister, and she's got kids the same age as our son. And we were just in love with the idea, like, okay, at least they'll kind of grow up together, and, we can figure it out there. Because $2,200 a month mortgage is a lot more flexible than $9,000. Yeah.
Which you're going from big city life to the burbs. Did you see that coming?
Well, understand is that I'm from Texas, and I grew up on a ranch, and so I don't have a problem being country. If I want to be, I can be as country as any redneck you've ever seen. Being there for 16 years, we filled our bellies of New York. I mean, we have no regrets. We accomplished great things. We won awards. I mean, we were ZAGAT 30 under 30. Even more impressive was that it was, we did it at a catering company, and ZAGAT has never, ever done anything with a catering company. And, we changed an industry, in the biggest, most famous city in the world, in the highest levels, in the most competitive atmosphere. And nobody will deny this. All the event industry in New York City, the way it is now, is 100% reflection on what, me and my wife are doing. Like, all these companies pivoted to be able to compete with what we were doing, because we were bringing Michelin level food to an event, in a mobile kitchen, in a back room of a closet, working with sternos,
Well, that's what I feel like you guys have the opportunity to do in Birmingham, is to change the game. And this is, a James Beard Award, winning town in terms of a few of its culinary actors. And so I don't know necessarily if Birmingham's prepared for what you're about to bring, but it's super exciting. And one of the big reasons we wanted to have you on, because we've dined at your table. We've tasted your food, but we've seen your creative process, just your creative presentation. It's just, you cannot describe it in a podcast. But before we kind of fast forward to that, were you guys, when you got here to Alabama, were you just planning to chill for a while? Like, hey, the restaurant business is dead. We're going to just take some time off and recharge, because you've been 7 days a week for 16 years?
Yeah, that was the plan. It's just to take some time off. I mean, we had, now that we sort of reduced our monthly liability, we had a lot of flexibility to, operate for a year to do nothing. And that was the original plan, is just sit back, take a year off, and, enjoy our son and, just live life, because we hadn't lived life. Make no mistake. I mean, we live in an exciting city of New York, but we never experienced any of it. We never went to a Broadway show. I don't even know what that's like. I couldn't tell you. I've never been to one. We didn't go do things. We worked. We worked. That's all we did. We woke up, we went to work. Came home, we fell asleep, showered maybe, woke up and did it again. Like, we didn't go do anything. The only thing I can tell you about is where to go have a good meal. I can tell you all the restaurants, because that's, whatever free time we did have, that's what we did. So it's like literally our religion. We didn't believe in God. We didn't believe in anything other than food. I'm not saying that I don't believe in God. I'm just saying, like, in that mindset, right. Like, as we're going.
It just consumed you.
It consumed us. And that's all I ever did. I mean, I wouldn't sleep. I literally would never sleep. Me and Jen would literally get into knockdown, drag out fights, because she's just like, Tyler, come to bed. Like, you need to sleep. I'm like, I can't. I got things to do. I got to, I would come home, and my drive was so crazy. who am I? Like, what is my reputation? Well, my reputation is being the engineer, right? I am the engineer. That's what I am. That's what I do. Like, for example, working at Boulay, right? Famous New York institution. David Boulay was the Ferran Adria of his time. He put New York on the map. I mean, he is massively, internationally famous. A legend. And going in there, it's like, alls I did was, Boulay had an idea. He could just barely articulate it to me. I want Comte, and I want, we need to have a nice cloud of Comte, and I don't know how you do it, but let's see if we can do with some asparagus, So asparagus, Comte, and a cloud. And I'd be like,
that was your direction.
I'd be like, cool, I got it. Let me put something together. And I would, on top of my prep and daily work, I would then put mass amount of efforts in sort of developing and R&Ding this cloud of Comte. Having no idea I was going to do it. I mean, you're putting hundreds of variations. I mean, just imagine a scientist trying to, how many vaccines have they gone through to try to figure out a vaccine for this COVID garbage.
Right.
It's like that's what I would do for a Comte cloud. And I, when I'd work and get done and get home, I would go right back to work and, it's like work on the Comte cloud in my apartment, And so, what it gave me was, a lot of sort of research, discipline to sort of go out and find it because nobody was going to give it to you. No one was there to help you.
Right.
And you got to have a chip on your shoulder. You got to have an attitude. It's like, screw you. I'm here to crush you. Like, I'm here. I'm going to be better than you. You may be better than me now, but I will be better than you. Like, you either that or you need to pick your game up because I'm going to I'm coming for you, This might be the guy working next to you that has 20 years more experience than you. So when this guy was making tempura, and I was like, man, it's really good tempura. Like, can I get that recipe? He's like, he looked at me like a crazy eyes. Like, and you just can't help it. Like really? Like, really? A tempura? You won't give me the recipe? Really? And at that point, you're just kind of like, you know what? It's not that good. Screw your recipe. I'm going to make my own better one. And it became that. No one was there to help you. There was no camaraderie. You had your friends, your little cliques that you could bounce some things off, but it was a small group. It wasn't like, you go anywhere and be like, oh, yeah, let me help you. So, you have to go and you have to put the work in. And this is a time when, the whole molecular gastronomy thing was going on. And there wasn't a lot of literature about it. These restaurants are the innovators. And so there's literature on it now, 10 years later. But at the time, there was nothing you could go to and be like, let me look at this recipe and emulate this. So that whole engineer thing, right, is I think Alton Brown is a great guy, right? I think he's honest with himself. And if you listen to interviews of Alton Brown, he's super legit. One time I was watching an interview of him, he was just like, I started working in New York and as a cook, and I realized wow, I really suck. I'm never going to be better than these people. I can work as hard as I can. I'm never going to be better than them. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to get a different strategy. I'm going to outlearn them. I'm going to go out and I'm going to go and get my hands on every single thing I can, and I'm going to outlearn them. And that's going to be my strategy to rise to the top. That's what I did. It's like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to outlearn you because you're not going to put in the effort that I'm going to put in to get this intellect, right? There's two types of intellect, right? It's the one you're born with, your capacity, and then there's the one that you actually dedicate to get. So you could be the smartest person on the planet, but if you're born in Ghana, you're never going to have the opportunity to show how smart you are because you just don't have the data or access to data. Right. So I'm going to go and I am going to be a miner of data. That's what I'm going to be. That's me. I'm going to go out. I'm just going to mine as much data as I can and put it in I'm going to deposit it in my bank of knowledge. And that became my strategy. So, one day I had a really weak moment, and because I was out with Jen, and she was out with the Danielle people. Every restaurant would go to their bar. And so I got out of work. I rode the train up to Times Square. They went to this place called BXL. It's a crappy. Usually the bar you go is pretty crappy, but after they closed, they would close the blinds and you could smoke cigarettes in BXL or after hours. You know what I mean? You can't smoke, but there's places you can go and you can do whatever you want. So they would go there. All these French dudes just smoke like chimneys, right? So that's one bar you could go to and smoke, and so that's why they wouldn't have hung out there. And I was there, and I was meeting Jen's friends and telling them where do you work? Oh, you're a chef. Where do you work? I'm like, well, I work at Crew, and I could tell I perked this guy up over his ears, and then he finally kind of came over. He was listening to the conversation, and He came over. He's like, oh, so you work at Crew, huh? I was like, yeah. He's like, I used to work at Crew. He's like, it's the best restaurant I've ever worked at. It's unbelievable. He's like, I love that place. And, he's a pretty high up guy at Restaurant Danielle, sous chef. And so we started talking. We're like, oh, we have this common connection of Crew. Like, awesome. So, tell me about, he's like, how's Andy? How's so-and-so? I'm like, oh, good. Give him like the update. And finally, as we're talking, he is an innocent conversation to him, but devastating to me because he was like, he confused me with another guy, right? There's another cook that we started at the same time, and he's just a train wreck. And we started talking about him, and he at some point confused him with me. And he's like, oh, is that the guy that like cooks with all the chemicals but doesn't know how to cook at all? And I'm like, what?
Talking about me?
I'm like, what? He's like, yeah. Like the guy has like all these chemicals in his house. He's like, tries to do all these big, he doesn't know how to cook. I'm like, yeah, that's the guy, and I'm just like kicking the gut, right? Like destroyed, devastated. And I am pissed. I am pissed off because now, these guys are going out of their way talking about me, right? These cooks, like, I've never been to a place and like made friends because I was never interested in being your friend. Like, get out of my way. I'm going to steamroll you. I don't care who you are. So, coming back to work, imagine showing up to work the next day. It's like, I've got this rotten feeling in my gut. Like, I don't want to be there. It's something you have to really work through, right? And, I'm just like, sort of a new motivation where it's like, they don't think I'm a good cook. I'm going to show them how good of a cook I am. Finally, one night I went out with that guy about the tempura recipe and I came clean with him, because it was still bothering me. It still hurt. It hurt really bad because, going back to the story of high school, like I've really committed myself and now I'm learning that I'm not good enough. It's like, think about all the emotions and thoughts of my brain is telling myself. And it's a weak moment. It's a great example of how the mind can be such a devastating enemy to you. And, I think the greatest example is like, someone who commits suicide, right? And chefs commit suicide. Like they off themselves all the time because it's such an emotional thing and you put yourself out there in such a vulnerable way. It's like the first time you hit like where you're just totally destroyed, what other options do you have? It's like, think about the thought process of how long it must take for that mind to convince you that that's the best way out, right? It's not overnight. It's like chipping away slowly every day, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year until finally you're like, you know what, you're absolutely right. I can't know, what am I thinking? I absolutely got to go kill myself. It's the only way out. So like it's a great example of how powerful the mind is and how in check you have to keep it. You have to dedicate a lot of energy to keeping your mind in check, having power over this thing, and, a lot of times when I sort of have conversations, I'm not interested in having a surface level conversation that's like politically correct, right? So like I will intentionally like try to push buttons and like engage and like piss that person off to where, it's like, cool, awesome. We finally got through this, your conscious that calls itself you. We're finally through the thing calling itself Jared, and now we're talking to Jared. Right. All right, so let's have a real conversation now, right? You're all pissed off, and like now we can have a real meaningful conversation where you're not gonna have a lot of walls built up deflecting what I'm trying to say to you because I need to speak to you about this thing. I need action now. So, open up about this thing, and he's like shakes his head, and he's like, wait, what? He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, man, I just can't shake it. I'm trying to shake it and I can't shake it. I'm devastated. It's horrible. He's like, how about this? Here's a different perspective. He's like, how long have you been working at Crew? I'm like, I don't know, 6 months. He's like, okay. Do you see the chef coming up to me and asking my opinion on things? I'm like, no, I don't. This is a guy I regard as a 1,000 times better cook than me, right? He's like, is Shay coming up and asking my, how I would do this or what I would put this with? Or you see him asking anybody that? I'm like, oh, no. He's like, no, but he asks you. He respects your opinion. So where do you land? And I'm like, whoa, you're absolutely right. When you have success, make no mistake, there are people that are there to kick you down because your success is their failure. And envy is the one sin that no one will ever admit to. We'll admit to some heinous, horrific things, but we'll never admit to envying someone, truly. And, as I learned and grew more, it's like I'm giving respect just freely. And the guy that's like saying these things about me to this guy I met at BXL is actually a horrible cook. As I learned, I didn't know him, so I'm like, well, he must be a great cook. So
Right.
But he's actually a terrible cook. His name was Andy Shoe, and we literally called him Andy Shoemaker. But he was with Shay for so long, like he was like Shay's loyal guy. And so you can forgive a lot of things as long as someone's like super loyal to you,
Right.
But why is that? Why is it the case? Like there's you're forfeiting so much access to so much talent because of your feeling of comfortability around this guy, When I would almost argue it's like it's better to be uncomfortable, right? And so that's sort of what a lot of my theme of my life is like I want uncomfortable. Like I want to have uncomfortable conversations, not because I'm comfortable with it, but the more uncomfortable conversations you have, the more practice you have, and therefore the better you become at it.
Right.
And once you get to a point, you're just like, I don't even care. It's still like you say you sit down and like about to fire someone, right? It doesn't mean I don't have those emotions where it's like, oh God, I don't want to do this. Yeah. But you're like, screw it. This is an opportunity to have another uncomfortable conversation with somebody to learn some more things about what to say or how to do it, or if you can say something impactful, great. You know what I mean? Like it's those sort of things that, I have learned to embrace rather than shy away from them. Yeah. And this is coming from a guy, like the first person I ever had to fire. I couldn't do it. I didn't have the balls. I didn't have the capacity, and I didn't have the courage to do it. I totally had to go get my counterpart and be like, bro, I can't do this. I need you to come do this for me. And he's just looking at me, he's like, what? He's older because, this whole path that I've taken has put me in positions where I am so much younger than the people that are around me in those equivalent positions. So, if I had to go to this guy, he's just looking at me, he's like, what are you talking about? Hey, I don't have time for this. And why can't you just go fire the person? I'm like, yeah, but I like this person and I can't. He's like, hang on, come with me. And he walks downstairs and he's like, hey, you, get out of here. You're fired. Thank you. Bye. And I'm just like, you are so mean and cruel. And he's like, what's the problem? He's like, what is your problem? This person's standing here. He's like, that person's a loser. They don't have a clue. Like, get rid of him. And it's just like a person's still standing there. And I'm like, what? I wanted them to like me. I had a weak moment when, it didn't need to be the case because that's not what we were there for. We're not there for that person's feelings or for my feelings. We're there to do a job. We're there to be successful. And these are the types of things, like, you want somebody that's, I had to constantly, took so much time out of my day to come back and correct this person. And they're not receiving or taking any of my guidance and becoming better. They're just staying the same every single day. No matter what we do or say, they're staying the same. Why would you want something like that on your team?
And what we have found through stuff like that is that they don't want to be there either.
Right.
Like truly when everybody can release, it's a win-win for everybody.
Right. So it really opened me up. And I just sort of made a commitment in my mind. I was like, listen, I'll always be honest to people. Like, I'm not going to shoot them up with hot air. I'm not going to have a fake relationship with people. So you're sort of taking a stance, right? You can't really get any more energy out of something that you put into it, right? If you heat something up to 212 degrees, you're not going to get to 213. You're not going to get to 212.1 if you only put 212 into it. It's impossible. Even on an emotional level, I feel like there's this like connective energy, right? And it's like you can't make more than there is. From my experience is that if you sort of take a middle of the road stance, and this is kind of how it goes. It's like, what do you think about Sarah? Sarah's fine. I mean, she's an okay person. I mean, she's has a pulse. She's Sarah. What am I going to say? You're not going to say anything bad about Sarah, but you're also not going to say anything good about Sarah either. You never give yourself an opportunity to be like, oh man, Sarah, that's a bad chick right there. She is so talented and smart and dedicated. You know what I mean? But for every one person that says that, there's somebody like, oh, Sarah, she's a horrible human being. I can't stand Sarah. But like kind of cancel each other out. So you kind of get back to like this equilibrium, right? If you take that middle of the road, you don't have any beliefs or any stance or anything. Nobody's going to say anything good about you, but nobody's going to say anything bad about you either. It's like you're kind of like this neutral thing. Because those are kind of canceling out, right? So if you take a stance on something strong, like you're going to have people that hate you. There's people that freaking hate me. They just can't get away from it. But the people that do like me, are like brothers for life. If I murdered someone, they'd be like, give me a call, I'll help you. it's that tight, and I'm only interested in those sort of connections than I am in these like weak acquaintances.
Right.
Not interested. I don't have time in my life to dedicate energy towards that pursuit. But I have time in my life to continue this amazing, deep connection. There's a lot of white and black in my world the more I go. There's a lot of gray area too, but if you want to have good friends, you need to be a good friend. It's that simple. It's very simple in its philosophy, but it's very difficult to sort of do that. It's like, I don't have time to go and do this thing with that person, but you know what? I'm going to go make the effort. I'm going to make time for it. I'm going to go be a good friend, and those things pay off and pay dividends over time. You start to build a network and people that are, really fighting for your cause, and you need people to fight for your cause, right. And you only have so much bandwidth. Going back is like, once I got through that horrific. I mean, it still affects me to this day. I still can imagine. I remember what it felt like. All I did was start just kind of taking notes of like how not to be. Like, what? I'm going to choose not to talk trash about this person. I'm going to choose, to try to spot the good things about this person rather than knock them down. Right. You're using your power of choice to try to enact positive, good things, yeah. Right? And have hard conversations. I'm a big subscriber to like Machiavelli. Machiavelli came from the Medicis of Italy. And if you want to talk about a family that single-handedly pulled humanity out of the Dark Ages, you're talking about the Medicis. They're single-handedly responsible for bringing on the Renaissance. So, I'm a big history buff because food is history. Right. And if you can understand the history, then you can understand a lot about food and have a lot of sort of comprehensive understanding, not just sort of regurgitating, but really sort of feel where it came from. This is researched and debated in universities around the world, and it will forever be, because, Machiavelli, there's a whole like philosophy basically called like Machiavellism. It's something where it's like, you rule with an iron fist. And what he would say is like, how am I to compete when there's evil in the world and they're willing to go to no lengths? If I'm an honest man or a good man, I would never subject myself to those tactics. And it puts me at a severe disadvantage. So the best I can do is be prepared to fight the same tactics that evil is fighting and try my best to have a positive result. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's Machiavelli, like in a nutshell. There's books and stuff written about it, but it's just like hard. It's like being hard, and it's the same reason why in school if you get in a pushing match with somebody, in Texas, there's no tolerance. No matter who's responsible, you're getting a citation, they're getting a citation, you're both getting suspended, whether you're right or wrong. It's a zero tolerance policy because, it's the only effective way to sort of deter people from violence, right. Like in a school, right? Guilty. Walk that path, right? So if you sort of take that mentality where, just trying to do good and but still be able to have those conversations. There is some real positivity that can come from it. Yeah. But it's a hard one to stay because you're at your own mercy, and so somebody could easily debate. Well, it's like you're taking upon yourself the responsibility to like have these conversations. Like, who are you to divvy out judgment? And so it's really hard to sort of keep that in perspective and not do it for a selfish reason. Where it's like you benefit because you could manipulate people. We all manipulate all the time, and so many various ways. My 2-year-old manipulates me. He doesn't know what he's doing.
At a very high level.
Right. It's like, and it's a lot of times, we acknowledge it and sort of go along with it because it's cute, right. But it's a survival strategy. We need cooperation and manipulation as humans. It's how we got to where we are. And but as long as you sort of keep it positive. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because you can do some real devastation with that,
And people do.
Or what can you tell us about Frenchies? When is it coming? What's it all going to be about? Why should we be excited?
Where's it going to be?
Yeah, give us the rundown on Frenchies.
Well, hopefully everything up till now sort of gives a little light on our pedigree, and it's impossible for us to operate without having that pedigree. So no matter what we do, even if it's a fast casual place, that pedigree will still come through. Right. Yeah, it's going to be called Frenchy. I'm interested in doing hardcore French food. We love France. My wife got engaged in France. We go to France every year. We rent a house in France. It's hard to sort of go to Italy. every time we're like, maybe we should go somewhere else. It's like, let's go to Italy. And like, but France is so nice. We got our spots. And, so we always sort of like opt out for France. And, we love French food. This will be a French restaurant. It's not going to be like a French restaurant with Southern soul. It's not going to be a Southern restaurant with French influences. Like, it's going to be French. And, there's enough of that food around here, the Southern stuff. And it's like, they're all the same. It's like going into New York and in springtime where you have morels and ramps and all those sort of springtime goods, fava beans. You can go eat at one restaurant in spring in New York and you've eaten at 12 because they're all the same menu. One way to differentiate ourselves, A, as well as, B, bring something new.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I am too. It sounds like it's going to... Well, it was so memorable for us, so I just think... we can't wait. I mean, I know you guys, you know how to cook and you know how to provide just amazing ambiance.
This is a, it's an ego-driven thing because this is ours. We have lots of partners and lots of other things, and we're not interested in partners. We want our own namesake. Yeah. For that being said, we're coming. We're coming hard. We're coming for James Beard Awards. We're coming for,
that's awesome.
We want to be, the best chef in the Southeast for sure. If not in the United, or the best restaurant in the Southeast for sure, or the best restaurant, one of the best restaurants in the United States. It's like that's what we're going for.
That's so cool. What's Jen's role in the business?
Well, she does the pastry. She's the pastry chef.
Okay.
So she came up in culinary, like she went to culinary school,
right?
And then switched to pastry in New York.
Okay.
And so very early on, like she had one job for 3 or 4 months as a cook, and then she switched to pastry pretty quickly. The corporate pastry chef of Danielle, or the Dynex group, was that. He was a culinary guy turned pastry. So he was an advocate for her to do it. And so she was in a perfect place, perfect time, perfect guy to get her into the pastry side of things. And so she learned all the Danielle pastry stuff. 3 Michelin star Danielle at DB Bistro, which is a 1 Michelin star. You've got, Balud Sud, Barbaloo. She worked everywhere.
That's awesome.
So how long are we going to have to wait before Frenchie's becomes a reality in Birmingham?
Well, we're under contract to buy a building right now. I can't say which building because there's, we signed a paper not to disclose it until it's done. But I would probably say fall. We're in.
Oh, that's pretty soon.
Yeah, but we're in no hurry, just because because we're buying the building. It gives us a lot of flexibility to sort of wait it out as long as we need to. It's not like a lease. For what we're paying on the mortgage and the everything else, it comes way below what a lease would cost, as well as, having the equity of the building.
Right.
So,
are y'all doing a build out, redesign?
Yeah. We'll build out. The kitchen there is really non-existent, and so we'll build out a whole awesome kitchen. And then we'll also, sort of, we don't want to change it too much. We want to keep, a lot of the character of it, but, just sort of put the bar in place and, but it's going to be awesome. It's gorgeous. It's a old plantation style home, about 10,000 square feet, 3 stories. It's got an awesome garden, 100-year-old shrubbery, landscaping on the outside. So it's a historical building on the historical registry. I just imagine it's just like, it'll just put you back in time because, where you'll get Southern component is that Southern is so freaking similar to France. The South has so many similarities to France of like how the political landscape is, how, your patriarchy or your matriarchy, it's, it's just so similar for the culture-wise, So, we go to France, we feel so at home because, we're so at home in the South as well. The way people dress, the way, especially go back to the 1800s, it's, just imagine sitting outside with a beautiful Southern gown, dress on and a little sun umbrella and just big hat, eating outside, in a garden, having some tea and biscuits or, something. It's just like, if you literally transplant those, they could seamlessly transplant. And so that's why it just kind of, for us, screams like French. And, we were going to do a big brunch. In New York, brunch is not just a thing to do. I mean, it's its own bona fide culture. We just loved it. So this is what we lived for, is going to have brunch. And we want to do a big brunch. So we're not even going to do lunch. We're just going to do brunch every day. It's
that's cool.
Monday through Friday, we're calling our lunch brunch.
Okay. And dinner menu?
Yep.
Amazing. Yeah.
Well, what I think is interesting is in the meantime, people can still come to the tasting table. Uh-huh. What's interesting is when you get into that environment, you guys you're creating these loyalists.
Yeah.
Like with us having been there, we're freaking sold. We don't care if you're doing French or Italian or Chinese, whatever.
We coming.
Whatever Tyler's doing, we're going. And so every person that comes to sit and dine at your table, I think is going to have that same effect, because the food, the presentation, it's on a level that we've never experienced before. And I don't think they can be prepared of what they're actually going to experience, because we didn't know what to expect. We thought it was going to be we're going to a dinner party.
We had no idea. I'm like, we're walking up to somebody's house. Is this right? Where's Jessica?
Yeah, this is weird. But it's so intimate and it's just a really unique experience. And I would just encourage anybody listening to get a reservation to come to the tasting table. And then, in fact, in turn, what that's going to do for you is just kind of create these brand loyalists. They're like, oh my gosh.
It's exactly why we are doing it. You summed it up. It's why we're doing it. It's why the price is the way it is. For what you get, at $125 a person and $35 for wine, we're not making a lot of money.
Right.
It's breaking even almost, just kind of supporting the advertising component. It's the marketing of what will come. And, getting people coming to a foreign land, leaving your 16-year network behind you. No one I know can help me.
Right.
I'm on my own. I'm on an island on my own, having to navigate a political landscape, especially in a southern state. There's things you got to do. Yeah. You just can't come in in the northern state and just be like, I'm here.
Elbow your way in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to go through the right channels. You got to do the right things. There's etiquette to it.
Yeah.
And so, that's what we're really desperately trying to do.
And Southerners expect the niceties.
Yeah.
And the politeness.
Like to be taken care of.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I mean about France, is that the French people like to be taken care of too. And there's an etiquette involved. You're not going to go there and not have them. They're going to be nice to you. They're going to have, great etiquette. They might talk trash as soon as you leave.
Yeah.
But, it's just something that is in their blood and their DNA. And, here, it's here. Yeah. And so we can relate to people like us because we get them. We're like, we get, yeah. So we're proper. We say things, we do things, and it's, we're a little bit better put together because we're not so stressed out all the time and just running a rat race. It's a beautiful thing. I love it. It's what I know. It's what I grew up in. So that's why one of the reasons why we ended up in Alabama. Because I promised my mom I would never come back to my hometown, and so this was a great spot that's very similar to the upbringing that we got, so we can give it to our son. And we just love it. The times we've come down to visit my sister, we've always just fallen in love with Birmingham. I had a great time, and just the people are just so nice. And we have so many friends from the supper club, and that was all strategic. It was all for that purpose. Yeah. Of gaining, loyal soldiers, people to support, because, when you start something, you need, there's only one truth that I can ever come in this world, universal truth, is that, we can't do it alone. You need help. Yeah. And people that think they've done it on their own, sorry to break it to you, somebody's helped you along the way. Yeah. If you come good with that, then, it's like you can enlist people's help strategically, and that's really what it's all about. And yeah, so we try to put it at a price point where we not scare people, but still give them a Michelin star level experience in a comfortable atmosphere. We play the music probably a little bit too loud, and we probably choose to play some inappropriate things here and there, but it's all part of creating the ambiance of just being comfortable.
Energy was so good. I can still remember. I remember walking in and the music being on. I'm like, it just feels good in here. Good. And that food's going to taste good when the energy's right. Yeah. It was so good.
And we haven't had a bad one yet.
I can't wait to come back.
Yeah.
He's going to make
We're going to have to come back. And it's like Diana being here for this podcast interview. She came here because of that experience. it was so impactful. It's like, whatever Tyler's doing, we need to kind of pay attention or be a part of or support it. Yeah. And so you found those loyal soldiers in us for sure. So, all right. Well, I am so grateful that you came on today and shared your time. We're so excited about Frenchie's. We can't stress enough that people owe it to themselves to experience the tasting table experience, for lack of a better word. I mean, it is powerful. You know, when we got in the car, we literally looked at each other and at about the same time said, wow, that was the best dining experience we ever had. And it's going to be powerful to watch this expand in Birmingham.
Evolution.
Yeah, it's going to be so exciting. So
yeah, no, that's our goal. And that experience is, just imagine how much, empathize with me for a second, where it's just imagine what went in for you to walk away and have that experience where it's like, wow, I mean, a lifetime of effort has gone in to be able to even have the capacity to give someone that experience and that memory. And that's the business we're in, is memories. I've had a lot of great meals. I couldn't tell you one thing that I ate. All I can tell you is that it was awesome. Yeah. Because, people will always forget, what you do or say, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. That's right. And, it's one of those things where it's like, that's the magic we're trying to capture. Yeah. And, me coming up, I mean, we weren't a wealthy family. This food that I'm making is not in my DNA. It's something that, I came into, and it's really one of the chef's albatrosses to bear, is that, even though you're of servitude, you are treated like you're sort of like an aristocracy or a royalty because you can have conversations with these people. Imagine if we were back in the France and with the monarchy going on. It's like you're cooking for a duke. It's like that duke's going to talk to you like you're one of him, but you're not. You're a servant because you just have this knowledge of like the finer things that he can't talk to anybody else about. You can't talk to anybody else about it because no one that's working for you even knows what the caviar or truffles are. So we love doing it, and it's definitely our calling in life. And that experience, if you distill it down to one thing, it's like that's what it's about. The food, everything is irrelevant. The only thing that is relevant is walking away and having a good memory. Yeah. And that's yours. It's the most intimate thing that you have in your life is the things to your friend before we got on talking about having cancer. He's just playing back his life in a reel. And it felt warm. That's what it's about. Those are the stakes. And the stakes are extremely high. In the history of the world, your experience means nothing. But to you in that moment, it meant everything. And that's the powerfulness about it.
Wow. I can't think of a better way to end.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again for coming in. This has been amazing. I can't wait to share your story with the world and inspire people to sit at your table. It's a special experience.
Good.
It is.
All right. Thanks, y'all. Thanks for listening to the Impact Agent Podcast. If you liked the show and got something out of it, please like the Impact Agent Podcast on Facebook and rate and review the show on iTunes or anywhere you listen to podcasts. This really helps us grow the show and helps other agents find it. Please share it with your friends and coworkers as well. Want us to deliver the show to you via email every week? Then email me at jason@impactagentuniversity.com and we'll send you the show every week. Please let us know what you think about the show, what you like, what you don't, or possibly make a suggestion about a topic you want to hear. Email me at jason@impactagentuniversity.com or leave us a message on Facebook at Impact Agent Podcast. Until next week, everybody be productive, safe, and happy, and always keep learning. This podcast is produced by Johnny Gwynn at Deep Fried Studios in Mobile, Alabama, and is paid for and powered by ImpactAgentUniversity.com.